Sterile millionaire sees boy at ex-wife's grave. His words uncover a heartbreaking truth. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The wind that afternoon was unforgiving, slicing through the manicured lawns and polished gravestones like a whisper of forgotten regrets. Clouds rolled across the sky, dragging shadows over the cold marble as if nature itself wished to mourn in silence. Alexander Pierce, 47, adjusted the collar of his dark cashmere coat and stared blankly at the granite headstone before him. Claire Whitmore Pierce, beloved daughter, wife, friend, 1977 to 2019. There were no flowers in his hand this year. He hadn't brought them, not because he forgot, but because he no longer knew what to say with them. The ritual of this annual visit had grown sterile, a calendar obligation observed with the same detachment he brought to quarterly earnings calls. Claire had been gone 6 years, and though her name still echoed in pharmaceutical foundations and charitable endowments, Alexander had long since buried the emotions with her. Or so he told himself. He glanced at his watch. 15 minutes more, and he could leave. He had carved this brief window between meetings with shareholders and a scheduled interview with Bloomberg. The chauffeur waited at the gates. The jet idled at the airstrip. Life had moved on, as it always did in his world. But something made him hesitate. A sound, not loud, but sharp against the silence. A sniffle, raw and unguarded. Alexander turned. Just a few yards away, seated before a small, unmarked headstone, was a boy. Thin, maybe 8 or 9, his shoulders hunched against the wind. He wore a worn navy hoodie too large for him, sleeves frayed and faded. His wheelchair, functional but old, was parked at an awkward angle on the damp grass. His head was bowed, but his soft sobs drifted across the space between them. For a moment, Alexander felt the instinct to walk away. He was not equipped for this. Children, grief, vulnerability, none of these belonged in the boardrooms he ruled. He'd spent decades walling himself off from the unpredictable tides of emotion. But the boy didn't seem to notice his presence. Or perhaps he didn't care. Alexander took a step forward, then another. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice more brittle than he intended. The boy looked up, startled. His face was pale and streaked with tears. There was something haunting in his eyes, not just sadness, but an aching familiarity Alexander couldn't place. The boy wiped his nose with his sleeve and blinked up at him. "Are you Mr. Alexander Pierce?" he asked. Alexander frowned. "Yes." The boy reached into his lap, pulling out a weathered envelope. His fingers trembled as he held it out. "My mom told me to give this to you before she died." Alexander didn't move. Something about the envelope, the loopy cursive handwriting on its front, the worn edges, the faint scent of lavender, rattled his carefully composed silence. Slowly, he took it. He didn't need to see the signature to know who had written it. Claire. His breath caught. He turned away from the boy, unfolding the letter with mechanical precision. The paper was delicate, the ink faded in places, but her voice rang out in every line. "Alexander, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And I can only pray that by some miracle you're still the man I once loved, even if only deep inside. This is Noah, our son. Yes, ours. The doctors were wrong. You weren't sterile. I found out I was pregnant just weeks after we separated. But by then, your heart was so hardened, so convinced that children were distractions, that I couldn't tell you. I was afraid. I raised him alone. He deserves more. He's kind and bright and brave in ways I never was. He's also sick, a degenerative condition, the kind your labs once ignored because the market was too small. But he is not small, Alexander. He is everything. If you ever loved me, love him. Claire." Alexander stood rooted in place, the wind tearing at the edges of the letter. He looked back at the boy. Noah. Noah watched him quietly, his small hands twisting the sleeves of his hoodie. He didn't plead. He didn't ask for anything more. But in the silence, Alexander heard the weight of generations, of choices, of a love once too proud to admit its own fears. He crouched down slowly, meeting the boy's eyes. "Where are you staying now?" Noah shrugged. "Nowhere really. The lady from the hospice said they'd find a special home. I think they meant an institution. Because of... He gestured vaguely at his wheelchair. Because of this, Alexander felt something shift in his chest. It was uncomfortable, foreign. He stood, pulled out his phone, dialed. Mrs. Ellsworth, cancel my meetings. Indefinitely. And have the east wing of the house prepared. We'll need a nurse. And pediatric equipment. Immediately. He hung up before his assistant could protest. Noah looked at him, wide-eyed. Why are you helping me? Alexander didn't know how to answer. Not yet. But as he pushed the boy's wheelchair down the gravel path, past rows of silent stones, one truth rang louder than any boardroom bell. For the first time in decades, he wasn't walking away. He was walking towards something. Towards someone. The luxury penthouse on the 45th floor of Pierce Tower stood in its usual silence, its LED lights casting a glow over the Manhattan skyline. On the polished marble floor, Alexander Pierce paced restlessly, clutching the envelope Noah had handed him at the cemetery the day before. In the past 24 hours, he had contacted 3 top-tier clinics, 2 genetic labs, and even a national DNA registry center to get what he needed: confirmation of a biological relationship. Hair samples from both him and Noah had been sent out that same night. Alexander had never felt time weigh so heavily. For the first time in his life, he couldn't control the outcome. He couldn't calculate the risk-to-reward ratio, and there was no one to negotiate with. When the email from the genetics center appeared in his inbox, Alexander's chest tightened under the crushing weight of truth. Paternity match, 99.9989%. That was his son. He collapsed into the leather chair in his office, staring at the open letter written in familiar handwriting. You never wanted a child, so I stayed silent. But knowing I didn't have much time left, I changed my mind. No one needs you. For the first time in this unwanted journey into fatherhood, Alexander felt utterly lost. In his 25 years building a pharmaceutical empire, he had manipulated partners, crushed competitors, ousted shareholders, and made every decision with razor-sharp precision. But now, facing a disabled child with no one else to turn to, there was nowhere to run, no deal to make, no escape. In the days that followed, Alexander began researching Noah's condition. Pediatric muscular degeneration. The words read like a cruel riddle. Progressive symptoms, steadily weakening the body. He kept reading, studying, taking notes, emailing, and calling the world's top specialists. One afternoon, he saw Noah try to transfer himself from his wheelchair to a nearby chair. The boy's thin arms shook, his face twisted in pain as he struggled to lift himself. In that moment, Alexander stepped forward and held his arms steady. It was the first time he had felt true fear. He couldn't buy Noah's strength. He couldn't make promises. And hardest of all, he felt guilty. Alexander sat beside him, helping guide his fragile arm under the nurse's instructions. In that moment, Noah looked up at him, no longer afraid, just calm. I know you don't know how to be a dad. Mom said maybe you'd regret things. But at least you're here. The words cut through him like an autumn wind, quiet but chilling to the bone. For the first time in his life, Alexander realized some things in life can't be calculated. They can only be lived and faced. Alexander Pierce's estate was perched on a quiet hill north of Portland, Oregon, a place long filled only with the hum of air purifiers, the occasional chime of the security system, and the even, measured footsteps of the aging housekeeper. Everything there was orderly, pristine, and utterly devoid of warmth. Much like Alexander himself, Noah arrived in a private ambulance, arranged by Alexander. The boy sat silently in his wheelchair, arms wrapped around a worn canvas backpack containing a few changes of clothes, a stack of sketches, and a small diary. His eyes were dry. He had no tears left. Alexander followed a few steps behind, polite but distant, like a businessman welcoming a client, not a father meeting his own child. Alexander's personal physician had arranged a room for Noah on the ground floor, next to the overnight nurses' station. Medical bed, respiratory support, emergency alert system. Everything was flawlessly installed. Alexander surveyed the setup and gave a slight nod, as if approving a budget proposal. emotionless, focused solely on efficiency. "Dinner will be delivered in 15 minutes, he said curtly before turning away, leaving the boy alone in a sterile room of white lights and glass walls. That night, rain began to fall. Portland sank into a thick mist, while inside the estate, Alexander sat alone in the library, a glass of red wine in hand. In front of him lay Claire's letter, laminated and stored in a leather folder. He had read it at least 10 times, but still couldn't grasp why she had kept the truth from him for so many years. "You once called children the weakness of successful men." Her words echoed in his mind. "So I stayed silent. But now I hope you'll be braver than your younger self for our son." A faint sound pulled him from his thoughts. A piano, soft, broken, barely audible. Alexander rose, following the long corridor to the living room, where Claire's old grand piano stood, untouched since her days at the conservatory. It had been left to gather dust under a faded cover since the day she walked away. Noah sat at the piano. His frail hands rested on the keys, fingers curled awkwardly as he tried to play a melody. The notes were halting, off-tempo, sometimes silent, but in the chaos of sound there was something raw, something real. A voice from the heart of a lonely child. Alexander stood frozen. A strange feeling stirred in his chest. Not anger, not discomfort, but something close to pain. Noah's music wasn't beautiful, but it stripped away Alexander's defenses like nothing else ever had. He turned back, retreating to his office and shutting the door, but sleep never came. The sound of that fragile music lingered in his mind like a question he couldn't answer. The next morning, when Rebecca, Noah's new nurse, entered the dining room, she froze. Alexander was making tea and setting out breakfast. "I think I came in for the wrong shift," she joked gently, clearly surprised. Alexander didn't look up. He poured the tea and replied, "I figure I should eat breakfast with my son at least once." Noah was wheeled in, visibly unsure of what to make of the scene. His father sat waiting with a plate of pancakes and silver cutlery. The boy nodded slightly, eyes avoiding Alexander's. "You played the piano last night?" Alexander asked, his voice raspier than usual. Noah nodded. "What piece was it?" "Claire de Lune, by Debussy," he answered quietly. "Mom used to play it when I couldn't sleep." Alexander felt a sharp twinge in his chest. Claire used to play it too, on nights he came home late when she sat alone in the dimly lit living room. Back then, he dismissed it as some artistic whim. Now he understood. It was a language she and their son had shared, one he had never learned. "You played it well," he mumbled. Noah said nothing, but his shoulders relaxed ever so slightly, as though a brick had just been removed from the invisible wall between them. In the days that followed, Alexander began to do small things. Waking early to eat breakfast with Noah, flipping through physical therapy manuals, asking the house librarian to create a reading nook tailored to the boy. He wasn't one for soft words, but he listened. And to Noah, that was enough for a beginning. One afternoon, Rebecca walked past the music room and found Alexander inside, carefully dusting each piano key, replacing strings, and coordinating with a technician for fine-tuning. "I wanted to sound like it did when Claire was alive," he said softly. Noah didn't know that very night, Alexander spent 3 hours at the piano, painstakingly relearning Claire de Lune from an old sheet music book. Hands once skilled only in signing contracts now fumbled clumsily on ivory keys. But he didn't stop. He needed to say something to his son, and he had chosen music. A week later, he invited Noah to the music room. "Want to hear me try a piece?" he asked. Noah blinked. "You play piano?" "I'm learning." Alexander sat, placed his hands on the keys, and began. The rendition was rough, full of stumbles, with whole sections missed. But Noah never looked away. When the final note finally came, he whispered, "Mom would be proud." It was the first thing Noah had ever said to him without a trace of fear. Alexander felt a lump rise in his throat. He wasn't a man prone to emotion, but in that moment, seeing warmth flicker in his son's eyes, he realized this was what he'd been missing all his life. That night, Alexander opened his laptop, not to check stocks or draft contracts, but to research Noah's disease. He reached out to rare specialists, read every medical journal article he could find with the same relentless focus he once reserved for billion-dollar deals. Before bed, he stepped quietly into Noah's room and gently pulled the blanket over his shoulders. Noah was asleep, but on his face, for the first time since arriving, was something close to a smile. Alexander sat beside the bed for a long time. He said nothing. He simply placed his hand on the boy's, the same hand that had played Claire de Lune on a rainy night and awakened a man who once thought himself incapable of love. Alexander Pierce's mansion stood quietly amidst the serene suburbs of Portland, Oregon. From the outside, it retained its majestic and sturdy appearance, mirroring its owner's persona. However, within its walls, invisible cracks had begun to form, not in the brickwork, but in the soul of a man who once believed he could control everything with logic and power. That morning, Alexander awoke earlier than usual. Sleep had eluded him, as memories of the past and images of Noah lingered in his mind. He entered his study, with a dim light of dawn filtered through the curtains. On the desk lay a thick folder, the previous quarter's financial report of the pharmaceutical company he once led. Flipping through the pages filled with numbers and charts, his eyes settled on a note. Rare neuromuscular disease research project, terminated due to lack of profitability. His heart sank. That was the very disease afflicting Noah. He recalled the board meeting years ago when he had coldly decided to cut the project to focus on more lucrative products. Rising from his chair, Alexander walked to the window, gazing at the garden where Noah often sat reading. The boy was there, engrossed in a book on his lap. A wave of guilt washed over him. He had once prided himself on making tough decisions, but now realized those choices had contributed to his son's suffering. That afternoon, Alexander visited his company's former laboratory, seeking out the scientists who had worked on the shelved project. Upon entering, the familiar scent of chemicals and the hum of machinery greeted him. Dr. Emily Carter, one of the lead researchers, approached him. "Mr. Pierce, it's unexpected to see you here," she said. "We've continued our research on the disease, even without company funding. Some benefactors have helped us keep going." Speechless, Alexander was moved by their dedication. Despite the project's cancellation, these devoted individuals had persisted, driven by compassion and belief. He surveyed the lab, once a symbol of progress and hope, now operating under constrained resources. On his way home, Alexander remained silent, confronting a past he had long tried to forget. The cold business decisions and profit margins now seemed meaningless compared to his son's pain and the struggles of others battling the same illness. That evening, after Noah had gone to bed, Alexander sat alone in the living room, staring at a photo of Claire, his late wife. He whispered, "Claire, I was wrong. I let greed and pride cloud my heart. I can't change the past, but I will do everything to make amends." The next morning, Alexander called Dr. Carter. "Doctor, I want to support your research project, not as a businessman, but as a father." Dr. Carter paused before replying. "We deeply appreciate it, Mr. Pierce. Your support will bring us closer to finding a treatment." A glimmer of hope ignited within Alexander. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he was prepared to face it, for Noah, for Claire, and for himself, to become a better man. The morning sun in San Francisco gently filtered through the glass panels of the top floor of Pierce Biotech, casting a soft glow over the sleek, steel-lined boardroom. Alexander Pierce stood at the head of the table, his reflection mirrored in the polished surfaces. A man transformed, no longer just the formidable soul known for his sharp acumen and steely demeanor, but now a father confronting an irrevocable crossroads. Before him lay the comprehensive reports of the Helix Hope Project, a groundbreaking initiative he had personally revived upon discovering that his son, Noah, was afflicted with a rare neuromuscular disorder. Once terminated under his directive for lacking profitability, the project now symbolized a profound personal reckoning. As the board members assembled, accustomed to Alexander's unwavering focus on fiscal metrics, they sensed a shift. He addressed them not with charts and forecasts, but with conviction. Thank you all for convening early. Today, I won't be presenting our quarterly financials. Instead, I wish to discuss a new direction for Pierce Biotech. The room buzzed with murmurs. We've long allowed profit margins to dictate our path, he continued. I was complicit in this, but I was wrong. Gerald Hoffman, the CFO, interjected. Are you suggesting we abandon our most lucrative oncology therapies to focus on unprofitable rare diseases? Not abandon, Alexander clarified, but reprioritize. These so-called niche diseases affect thousands, including my son. A hush fell over the room. Few knew of Alexander's personal life. Pierce Family Foundation plus 29 CBR, plus 29 MovieWeb, plus 29. Noah suffers from a rare neuromuscular condition, he revealed. I once signed off on halting research into this very disease for lack of profit. I can't undo that, but I can choose a different path now. Patricia Chun, Director of Public Affairs, leaned forward. Are you proposing we become a charitable organization? No, he responded. I propose we become a healing institution, where medicine serves humanity, not just the bottom line. Debate ensued, with concerns about market reactions and company stability. Sensing resistance, Alexander stood firm. If the board cannot support this vision, I will step down as CEO. Gasps echoed. Patricia whispered, You can't be serious. I am, he affirmed, producing a detailed plan. Tomorrow, I will launch the Pierce Foundation for Rare Conditions, funded by my personal assets. I invite the company to transfer ongoing rare disease research to this foundation. And if we decline, Gerald challenged LinkedIn +1 Chapman University +1. Then I'll acquire the rights through public channels. Remember, I remain the largest shareholder. That evening back, at his Portland estate, Alexander found Noah nestled on the sofa, cradling their newly adopted dog. Did the meeting go well? Noah inquired softly. Alexander sat beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his son's back, a gesture that had become more natural over time. I resigned today, he shared, but I'm starting anew, building a place where research isn't discarded for lack of profit. Noah leaned into his father's embrace, offering silent support. 3 weeks later, the Pierce Foundation opened its doors in a modest 3-story building, once a tech startup hub. Inside, spaces were reimagined. Child-friendly zones, creative therapy rooms, and laboratories staffed by scientists previously let go, now reunited under a mission of hope. In the main hall, Alexander observed former colleagues and partners, now collaborators in a cause greater than commerce. A young girl in a wheelchair waved at him. He bent down, returning her greeting with a warm smile. Nearby, Noah engaged with a researcher, his eyes alight with curiosity about gene therapy and stem cell treatments. Rebecca, Noah's dedicated physician, approached. Are you certain about this path? She asked. Alexander looked around, his gaze settling on his son. I've never been more certain. That night, in the quiet of his library, Alexander retrieved an old photograph of Claire, her smile radiant beneath the shade of their favorite oak tree. I took too long to see clearly, he murmured, but I'm on the right path now. He placed the photo back, stepping into the hallway where Noah diligently practiced his physical therapy exercises. He recalled a phrase he'd once read. Every journey begins with a reason. Spring in San Francisco brought with it warm rays of sunlight, slipping gently through the windows of the villa where Alexander and Noah now lived. Even the air inside the house felt lighter, reflecting the quiet transformation in the bond between father and son. Alexander, once a cold and calculating pharmaceutical tycoon, was slowly learning how to be a real father. He began taking part in Noah's daily life, sharing breakfast with him, driving him to school, and even helping with his homework. Every evening, they spent time together reading or watching Noah's favorite movies. One day, Noah came home with a flyer from school announcing a student-parent science fair. His eyes sparkled with excitement as he asked Alexander to attend with him. Though hesitant at first, Alexander eventually agreed. At the science fair, Noah presented a small project about how cells function in the human body. Using simple models and hand-drawn illustrations, He explained everything in a way that even young children could understand. Alexander sat in the front row, attentively listening, unable to hide the pride on his face as he watched his son speak with confidence to a room full of strangers. After they returned home, Noah handed Alexander a drawing he had made. In it, the two of them stood side by side beneath a large oak tree, its branches full of bright green leaves. Beneath the drawing, Noah had written, "I forgive you, Dad. I'm here with you to change everything together." Alexander held the picture, eyes welling with tears. He wrapped his arms around Noah, overwhelmed by the warmth and love his son offered so freely. In that moment, he realized that no matter how broken the past had been, the present and future could still be built with love and forgiveness. From that day on, their relationship only grew stronger. They began participating in charity events together, supporting families facing circumstances similar to their own. Alexander used his knowledge and resources to help those battling rare diseases, while Noah inspired other children with his story of resilience and hope. The once cold and empty villa no longer felt like the lair of a ruthless executive. It had become a home filled with laughter and love. Alexander was no longer the lonely man hiding behind power and success. He had become a devoted father, ready to do anything for his son. And deep in his heart, Alexander knew the journey of fatherhood never truly ends. It's a long, winding road, filled with challenges, yes, but also with joy, meaning, and the kind of happiness he never thought he'd find. The morning sunlight filtered through the ancient oak trees, casting golden beams across the glass windows of the grand villa nestled atop Pacific Heights. Once a symbol of power and opulence, the estate was slowly transforming into something far more meaningful, a true home. Alexander Pierce stood before the tall window, gazing out at the front garden. His mind drifted back to the early days after Noah had moved in. The house, with its vast, echoing halls and towering staircases, had been a cold, unwelcoming place, utterly unsuited for a child with a disability who needed special care. Alexander realized that to truly become a father, he would have to change, not just himself, but the very space around him. He began by hiring a team of architects and interior designers to renovate the entire home. He had a compact elevator installed so Noah could move between floors easily. The hallways were widened and fitted with sturdy railings, while the floors were resurfaced with non-slip materials. Bathrooms were redesigned with safety supports and accessible features to allow Noah to care for himself with confidence and independence. Noah's bedroom was moved to the first floor, with a large window overlooking the garden. Alexander wanted his son to wake up each morning bathed in natural light, able to watch the trees sway and the flowers bloom. He also had a small therapy room built nearby, where Noah could do physical rehabilitation under the care of specialists. Out back, the once formal garden was transformed into a peaceful green retreat, complete with stone walkways, vibrant flower beds, and a child-safe swimming pool. Alexander and Noah spent countless hours in that garden, planting, watering, relaxing together. Those quiet moments helped them bond in ways that words never could. But Alexander didn't stop at redesigning the house. He began hosting family-style gatherings, inviting close friends and trusted colleagues to visit. He wanted Noah to feel the warmth of community, to know the comfort of being surrounded by people who cared, not just professionals, but real companions. One evening, after a cozy dinner, Noah handed Alexander a drawing he had made. It showed the two of them standing beneath a large oak tree, the villa in the background aglow with soft light spilling from its windows. At the bottom, Noah had written, "Thank you for turning this house into our home." Alexander held the picture tightly, his eyes brimming with emotion. He pulled Noah into a hug, overcome by the warmth and love his son had given him. In that moment, he realized the changes he had made weren't just about accessibility or comfort. They were about love, and they had helped him rediscover the deeper meaning of life. The once cold, empty mansion, silent and filled with solitude, was now filled with laughter, light, and the unmistakable warmth of love. Alexander was no longer a lonely man in a castle of stone. He was a devoted father, willing to do whatever it took to give his son the life he deserved. And deep in his heart, Alexander knew the journey of fatherhood never truly ends. It's a long, winding road, full of challenges, yes, but also filled with moments of joy and purpose that make every step worth it. Morning sunlight filtered through the ancient oak trees, casting soft golden rays into the study of Alexander Pierce. He sat in silence at his desk, holding a letter from the board of directors of Pierce Pharmaceuticals. Its message was clear: abandon the rare disease research project he had reignited, or be removed from a board. Alexander knew his decision had ruffled feathers. The rare disease initiative didn't promise immediate profits. In fact, it posed financial risks the company had long avoided. But for him, this was no longer about money. It was about ethics, responsibility, and love. Love for his son, Noah. He remembered those early days when Noah first came to live with him, a fragile, disabled boy with quiet strength and unwavering determination. It was Noah who had opened Alexander's eyes to the truth. Life was not defined by numbers or bottom lines, but by the human values he had long neglected. Alexander called an emergency board meeting. Standing before the boardroom table, his gaze steady, he laid out the vision behind the rare disease project, not just for Noah, but for thousands of children waiting for hope. I understand this project doesn't offer instant returns, he said. But if we only chase profit, what becomes of our responsibility as a healthcare company? We have the chance to lead, to bring light to those living in the shadows of illness. The response was tepid at best. Board members voiced concerns about dividends, stock prices, and market confidence. Some outright suggested he resign if he couldn't align with the company's financial goals. Alexander listened quietly, then rose from his seat. If doing what's right means I have to step down, then so be it. I resign, and I will liquidate my shares. With that money, I'll launch the Pierce Foundation for Rare Conditions, a nonprofit dedicated to research and support for those with rare diseases. The room fell silent. No one expected Alexander Pierce, the company's founder and its relentless leader, to walk away from power, prestige, and wealth for an ideal. Later that evening, Alexander returned home. Noah sat at the piano, his hands trembling slightly as he played. When he saw his father, he paused and asked softly, "Are you okay, Dad?" Alexander smiled, pulling his son into a hug. "I'm okay. I've decided to do the right thing." In the weeks that followed, Alexander began building the Pierce Foundation from the ground up. He recruited leading scientists, doctors, and researchers specializing in rare diseases. He partnered with hospitals and charities, expanding the foundation's reach and forming coalitions to support underserved families around the country. The journey wasn't easy. There were roadblocks, doubts, and moments of isolation. But Alexander never wavered. He had learned from Noah that love and perseverance could move mountains and heal hearts. 1 year later, the Pierce Foundation had made significant strides. Several breakthrough treatments had been developed, improving the quality of life for thousands of patients. Noah, too, was showing remarkable progress in his therapy, stronger than ever in both body and spirit. At the Foundation's first anniversary celebration, Alexander stood on stage, scanning the audience. His eyes locked on Noah, seated in the front row, pride glowing in his young face. "I used to believe life was about profit," Alexander began. "But my son taught me that the true meaning of life lies in compassion and connection. My hope is that the Pierce Foundation will continue to spread light into the darkest corners of our world." The room erupted in applause. As the sound echoed around him, Alexander felt something he hadn't felt in years: deep, genuine happiness. He had lost much, but he had found himself again, not as a titan of industry, but as a father, as a man finally living a life grounded in love, purpose, and the quiet strength of doing the right thing. The morning sunlight filtered through the branches of ancient oak trees, casting warm golden rays over the garden behind Alexander Pierce's estate. The oak tree that he and Noah had planted together a few years ago now stood tall, its lush canopy offering shade to a quiet corner of the yard. Beneath it, 11-year-old Noah sat, deeply engrossed in a book, his eyes glowing with a passion for science. From a distance, Alexander watched his son with indescribable pride. He remembered the early days, when he first learned of Noah's existence, a disabled child he had once denied. But it was love and unwavering devotion that transformed him from a cold, calculated pharmaceutical magnate into a devoted father and a respected humanitarian. The Pierce Foundation for Rare Conditions, the nonprofit he had founded, had since achieved remarkable progress in researching and supporting those affected by rare diseases. Several new medications had been developed, bringing hope to thousands of patients across the United States. Noah himself had become an active part of the foundation's mission, a junior researcher full of creativity and enthusiasm. One afternoon, as the two of them tended to the garden, Noah looked up and asked, "Dad, do you ever regret the decisions you made in the past?" Alexander smiled, his eyes full of warmth. "Yes, son, I do. But those mistakes led me to you. They helped me discover what life is really about. It's never too late to change, as long as there's love and courage." Noah nodded, then pointed to the oak tree in front of them. "Just like this tree, right? It needed time, trust, and care to grow from something painful into something strong." Alexander pulled his son into a gentle hug, feeling the steady heartbeat of a boy who was both resilient and full of hope. He knew their journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, and opportunities too, but with love and determination, they would face it all together. And like the oak tree, they would continue to grow, rising taller, stronger, and casting the shade of compassion across all those around them. In today's world, where a person's value is often gauged by wealth, titles, and influence, the story of Alexander Pierce, a successful businessman who relinquished his pharmaceutical empire to become a devoted father, serves as a poignant reminder of the true essence of success. Alexander's narrative is not unfamiliar. We see reflections of him in many around us. Individuals who dedicate their lives to building illustrious careers, sometimes at the expense of health, family, and youth. Yet, the pressing question remains: after all the accolades fade, what truly endures? In his middle age, Alexander believed he possessed everything: money, power, status. However, a letter from his ex-wife and the unexpected arrival of Noah, a disabled boy, upended his world. Discovering he had a son suffering from a rare disease forced Alexander to confront a reality he had long evaded: the human heart. Many elders in modern society grapple with regrets, missed opportunities for connection, unspoken apologies, and years consumed by work, neglecting the profound meaning of love. Alexander exemplifies that, regardless of how far one has ventured down a path of cold logic, it's never too late to turn around. Redemption is possible if one faces the truth and opens their heart. His story also sheds light on a stark reality within the U.S. healthcare system, where rare diseases and minority patient groups are often sidelined due to lack of profitability. Countless children like Noah await a chance at life, only to be overlooked because their conditions don't promise lucrative returns. Alexander's decision to forsake profit and establish a foundation for rare disease research wasn't merely a father's act. It was a reawakening of someone who once prioritized wealth over humanity. The most touching aspect isn't the scientific achievements of his foundation, but Noah's personal growth. Once deemed destined for a life of dependence, this disabled boy has blossomed into a passionate, young researcher, inspiring many. This narrative underscores a vital truth. With the right love and support, individuals can transcend even physical limitations. For older adults, especially those in the U.S., who may feel isolated in a fast-paced society, the journey of Alexander and Noah offers a gentle yet profound message. It's never too late to change. No mistake is beyond correction, provided there's love and courage. The oak tree planted by Alexander and Noah stands as a powerful metaphor. Trees don't mature overnight. They require time, light, water, and care. Similarly, human values aren't built on fleeting achievements, but are nurtured over time. In our twilight years, perhaps what we need most isn't a hefty bank statement, but someone to hold hands with, a home filled with laughter and a compassionate heart. We live in an era dominated by speed. News updates by the second, success expected before 30, lives defined by likes and followers. Yet, this story reminds us that some things can't be rushed. Emotional maturity, empathy, and human connection demand time, patience, and sincerity. Like Alexander, many may have missed opportunities in youth or made regrettable decisions. But the focus shouldn't be on the past. It's about the present and future. Everyone has the chance to rewrite their story through right choices, choosing love over profit, forgiveness over guilt, action over regret. If you're retired or pondering, is it too late? Remember, the most beautiful things take time to grow, like the oak tree they planted. It began as a tiny seedling, nurtured with tears, hope, and faith. And you, no matter where you are in life, can plant your own seed today. Thank you so much for being here. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to bring you more heartfelt stories soon. Until next time, stay kind, stay inspired, and I'll see you in the next one.